Welcome to the Fiduciary Wise podcast. I'm Marta Hurst, one of your hosts from Fiduciary Wise. Whether you're a thought leader, service provider, CEO, or decision maker, this podcast is for you. We break down best practices, the services and solutions available to you, discuss the latest topics, and shake up the industry norms. Join us as we explore challenges and navigate the future of fiduciary responsibility together. Hey, Isaac, how's it going today?
Doing real well. Living the dream over here. How about you?
Good. Why don't you give a little intro on yourself and then we will get jumping in.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Isaac Wood. As you can see, I'm an ERISA 402A specialist here at Fiduciary Wise. I've got over 13 years in the financial industry, and the last 7 have been focused on the defined contribution ERISA plan neck of that woods. But over those years, I've really developed a passion for 401k optimization. And what I mean by that is that the country's littered with plan sponsors that either are unaware of or just incapable of executing on the high fiduciary standards that ERISA says they're responsible for. And so I'm blessed to be able to do this at Fiduciary Wise, where my job is to go and help plan sponsors really optimize the management of their 401k plans by working with quality service providers that do quality work.
And we are very lucky to have you. So a little background on me. I have been in the retirement plan industry for 20 years. 17 of those with a TPA, and then I've been at Fiduciary Wise as a partner for a little over 2 years. I am active in ASPA. I am on the Women in Retirement Conference Committee currently, and then on the Fiduciary Wise side, I help facilitate a lot of our client meetings, and then work with advisors, prospective clients, different service providers to help better explain what we do here and help them improve their relationships and retirement plans.
And you do it really well.
Oh, thank you. We talked in our last episode, kind of just overall what all is involved in a retirement plan, what service providers are involved, what kind of things should we be thinking about. So I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into that today. So last time we shared a handout, and we will be doing that again. So you can find that in our show notes, something that you can download and keep handy. But we want to spend a little bit more time on the service provider elements for retirement plans.
So, yeah, and I think I'm really excited about this episode because we talked a little bit about it in episode 1. Most plan sponsors don't realize all the different roles and responsibilities that come along with the 401k plan. So this is a great piece to simply put out all these roles. And we're going to go even a little deeper than what this piece has, but kind of touch on these are the different areas of a 401k plan and kind of what the responsibilities are, but then also what are the possibilities, the service providers that are available that you could bring in to assist you in executing your fiduciary responsibilities.
Yes. And going forward, then we will be having episodes to dive really deep into those different responsibilities in the plan and how service providers fit and how you evaluate them. But hopefully today is a nice overview for everybody to kind of get us started.
So what you're saying is we're just getting started.
We're just getting started. I mean, come on, there's a lot to uncover in here.
There is. That's the point.
I've been in this 20 years, still learn stuff. So I guess we're still moving forward. So really 3 pillars of ERISA: the legal and management, and then investment oversight, which I think a lot of people kind of focus on when we talk about retirement plans, and then the administration piece of it, which I think is the other area people are most familiar with. So let's talk a little bit about the service providers that are under each one. And when you look at the chart that we've provided, the orange boxes are non-fiduciary roles, and the pink boxes are fiduciary roles.
Let's call it magenta.
So, magenta. So it is important to know, because we talked a lot last time about the things that you're responsible for, enrollment meetings and making sure your participants know what's going on with the plan. Of course, just the administrative part, testing and 5500 filing, all that kind of stuff. So obviously our clients aren't sitting at their employers. They're not doing every piece of the retirement plan. Some of those services can be hired out. So most common is, a TPA to help you with the plan design, plan documents, annual testing. The fiduciary, that is the non-fiduciary role. So
And
TPAs
TPA
typically,
stands for third party administrator. And so
thank
you
you.
can hear it in their name, administrator. They fill part of those administrative roles. Yeah.
Yes. So typically, again, like the compliance, they're the ones that are figuring it. They're the ones that you get the nice email from that says you contributed too much. Here's some money back, or here's how much you can put into your profit sharing plan this year. So those are the kind of messages that you get from them. They are working in a non fiduciary capacity. Now, there are some TPAs that will do some fiduciary pieces, but in general, that compliance work is not a fiduciary function. So they are following the terms of the document and executing certain work. They are not making decisions about the work that is being done.
So maybe let's take a step back and define that a little further. So we mentioned last episode, every plan sponsor is a fiduciary, and that's the scary word, right? You got
Yeah.
spooked last time when we were talking about it. The scary word is fiduciary. So what's the difference between a fiduciary role and a non-fiduciary role? Are there some designations that make something fiduciary?
Yes, and so as we're talking about this too, I also associate the word hire with a non-fiduciary role. So you are hiring a service provider to do a particular function, like a third-party administrator doing testing based on the document provisions that you have elected. A fiduciary role is a discretionary role, meaning that they have some ability to make some decisions and make some things happen. So I think the best example for that, and the one that people are most familiar with, is a 338 investment manager. So at 338 for a retirement plan, reviews the investments, analyzes those to determine, and that is under our investment oversight bucket. They then decide if there are changes that need to be made in the retirement plan with regard to the investments that are available to the participants. And then the last step of that, the discretionary step, is they actually make those changes. So they are responsible for monitoring and then making those changes if and when they see fit. So they are taking on the analysis and the like, they're pulling the trigger to make decisions ultimately. So that's the difference. If you look at non-fiduciary roles, they're the ones that have to go to the client and say, hey, there's a decision to be made here. Here's the options. Tell me what you want to do.
A non-fiduciary is
That's
executing tasks. They're doing things, the work, the administrative work in the TPA's case, they're executing tasks that are often repeatable throughout a year as you go year over year, repeatable tasks. But that fiduciary carries with it the weight of discretion or decision making, and it's making decisions that affect the plan and ultimately affect the
correct.
participants, but then also the responsibility for those decisions for that discretion. So as a fiduciary, if you're filling a fiduciary role, you're making a decision, but then you are also held responsible for said decision.
Yes, you got it. So we hire service providers to help with those non-fiduciary roles, and we delegate fiduciary responsibility to these magenta, thank you, colored tabs on our screen. So the record keeper is also a non-fiduciary. So again, they are operating under the terms of the document that are provided. So here's our eligibility. Here's a participant that needs a distribution. They meet the terms of the document. Here goes the distribution. But when it comes to making decisions about, should an investment be changed, that decision to make that change is a fiduciary decision.
And that can be
Signing
a
the
confusing
55.
cross section. That can be
Yes,
a confusing cross section for plan sponsors because oftentimes when they think of investments, they think of them as being on the record keeper platform on their website. They're going to that record keeper's website to access the investments. And so they can think that record keeper is filling a fiduciary role by providing those investments. But actually, those decisions were made before they get to the record keeper. Someone else is taking the discretion and the responsibility for choosing which investments are available on that platform. I mean, I've been in meetings talking with plan sponsors before where they think they're not a fiduciary at all because the record keeper is the fiduciary for everything. And that's just simply not the case.
That is simply not the case. I think we talked about this a little bit on the last episode. There's a lot of assuming of, well, these people do that. My advisor does this. My record keeper does that. When in reality, every record keeper, advisor, TPA, they have their own way of working in this industry, and so there could be a hole there that is not being taken care of. And I think there's a lot of misinformation, confusing information about fiduciary roles. So, there are some service providers out there, they might do a couple of fiduciary functions. And so now they've said, "Ooh, look at us. We helped you with your fiduciary liability." And it's not that they didn't, it's just that you still have some. And no
You
matter
still
what
have some
anybody
left. Yeah.
says, even if you hire like a Fiduciary Wise that is a 402A fiduciary and we take like 95% of the liability, those plan sponsors still have some fiduciary functions. One of those is hiring us. And so you can't just escape the whole thing. I think there are people who are in denial maybe about the amount of fiduciary liability that they have. And then there are other people who are terrified of any of it. And I think, with the right service providers and the right fiduciary help, you can build a great program that you don't have to be scared about what might happen. But also have some acknowledgement like, oh, there are things that need to be happening in this plan that maybe aren't happening with the service provider arrangement currently in place.
Yes, and oftentimes it's the service providers can provide additional services, but the plan sponsor hasn't engaged those services to be able to use those and to officially put the check in that box of that service being provided.
That is true. I see that too. Well, it was on that proposal that I got, yes, but it wasn't on the service agreement that was then signed subsequent.
Yep. So, I mean, as you see the breakdown of all the different roles, again, the three buckets being legal management and oversight, investment oversight, and then that administrative oversight. Then there's a lot of roles that fall into those three buckets. And as we mentioned, each bucket has fiduciary roles and non-fiduciary roles that kind of roll up into it. And so the importance there of understanding what roles am I filling as a plan sponsor, and then what roles are the service providers that I work with, what roles are they filling as well? Can plan sponsors just ask those questions?
They can. They should. I mean, but then I think it comes down to did I understand that answer that I got, or
Yes.
even recognizing all that is required to be taken care of, and making sure that all those things are. So that is part of the role of Fiduciary Wise. When we are on a plan as a 402A fiduciary, we have an annual checklist that we review to make sure that we know who is responsible for which aspects of the plan, and who is involved in those things as well. So just because, and again, when we look at delegating doesn't mean that particular role is doing those things. It means that they are then responsible for the parties that are. So like when we talk about notice delivery, Fiduciary Wise doesn't mail out notices. Mailing notices is not a fiduciary function. Making sure that the notices are correct and are sent out is a fiduciary function. So I think understanding, and that's not meant to be like tricky or sneaky. That's just part of the role. So when you are a fiduciary, it doesn't necessarily mean you are doing all those things. It means you're taking on the responsibility for ensuring that those things are done.
But if you're a plan sponsor and you don't have a service provider that's doing those things, it is your responsibility that they be done. And so that's where it's
Correct.
important to know as you're deciding which service providers to bring into and help you provide a 401k plan to your employees. It's important to know which services are they going to be doing, and which responsibilities are they going to be taking. But that takes knowing what all of those responsibilities are. You
Yes,
can't make sure someone's
absolutely.
doing that if you don't know what they are. So that's the challenge.
Yeah.
We mentioned this last episode. The challenge for plan sponsors across America is that ERISA holds them to level of expertise of the experts in each one of these fields. And if they aren't an expert themselves, it's ERISA strongly encourages them to then go out and delegate responsibility or hire those services to be executed by an expert. And there's over 75 different aspects of a 401k plan that need to be accomplished in any given year.
Yep, you got it.
Oh,
So, everything from enrollment and participant education to reviewing fee disclosures, monitoring service providers, reviewing the 5500, and signing the 5500. So I know the 5500 review. I working on the TPA side for 17 years, we definitely had clients that would call and say, okay, help me figure out like where some of these numbers came from. But I'll tell you, a lot of them just sign it. They are trusting that they have hired people who are competent. And I'm not saying that they're not, but people make mistakes and stuff happens. And just like when you file your taxes, I have a CPA, he does my taxes. Man, I think he does a good job, but I still have to look at him and say, okay, that doesn't quite make sense with what I sent you.
every
So there's
industry in
still like,
America, every industry in America is littered with human beings, and human
that's right.
beings
Yeah.
come with varying degrees of capabilities, even within their own industry. Right? Not every
Yes.
industry, not every person in any given industry is an expert and really great at that. And so the challenge is that as a plan sponsor, you're required to be an expert yourself and hire experts, and then you are responsible as the fiduciary for how they execute those. And so that's the importance of Fiduciary Wise. That's what we do. That's
Yeah.
why we are here, and it's why these podcasts exist. This is an attempt on our end to try to educate and try to communicate this to ultimately to plan sponsors out there, but then also to our service provider partners, whether they're advisors or TPAs or record keepers that come alongside to help them fill the fiduciary and non-fiduciary roles that they are tasked to do so.
So I think, and I don't know this, but kind of again, I've been in the industry for a while. Sometimes I think frequently there are people involved in retirement plans, and this might be the only retirement plan they've ever been a part of, or maybe a couple. Particularly if they are like on the committee for the 401k. A lot of those people are in leadership, have been in those positions for a long time. And so I think sometimes, as they are reviewing the service providers and who should be together and who can help us meet all of these requirements, they also don't always know what's out there because maybe they've been in the same thing for a while, or they've made some changes, and even they made a service provider change and they didn't realize that service provider didn't do this thing that the other service provider did. So I think that is one of our jobs at Fiduciary Wise is to help kind of figure out where those holes might be. But also it's important for your service providers to know and work with each other. So we talk about that sometimes. And theoretically, you can have a record keeper that's good and a TPA that's good and a CPA auditor that's good. It's better when they know each other and they work together because then they kind of know each other's weaknesses as well. So, oh, well, let's talk about how this is going to work because, we know that this TPA handles these things and we as the record keeper handle these things. And then everybody kind of figures out the puzzle. Because again, not everybody works exactly the same or has exactly the same service model.
When they have clearly
But
defined communication processes as well, and channels that are open. And so there's a lot of communication between the different service providers that needs to be taking place throughout any given year. And so when you work with service providers that are familiar with each other and work together well, they work
yeah.
together well. So they fit together well and they communicate well. And that can all be organized in a way that's very beneficial to the plan sponsor.
Yeah. And I know as we go into the rest of the season, we're really going to focus on some of those pieces and what are some best practices? What are we seeing in the industry? How do we make sure, as we've talked about, we are doing what is in the best interest of the participant, but also making sure that everything is being taken care of. So how do you take on that process? So, I think some of the other things that, the compliance and plan design component, the partners that you are working with, who is consulting with the employer on some of those things. How are they choosing what is best for their group of employees? How are they handling investment advice to if an employee has questions about their enrollment? Oh, hey, what investment should I pick? Okay, we don't want employers answering those kinds of questions. So what service providers are set up to help with all these different areas? So I know we will dig into that more this season, but I think it's really important to understand the difference between hiring a service provider and delegating fiduciary function, and then what ultimately can you delegate? How do you delegate as much as possible? That would be by hiring a 402A fiduciary, like Fiduciary Wise. But again, that plan sponsor is never totally getting rid of all of their fiduciary responsibility. But it's important that they know what things they are left with, what things have been shifted, what are the options within the plan to help reduce as much fiduciary liability as possible.
When I think, we're talking about the difference between delegating fiduciary responsibility and hiring service providers to execute non-fiduciary roles, right? But the backdrop to both of those solutions is that you're bringing in help. I actually
Yes.
I got a note from an advisor just last week who was like, "Hey, I'm working on this prospect for their 401k plan," and they actually told me that they think it's a violation of their fiduciary duty to hire a financial advisor. And I was like, there's confusion in the industry that
Yeah.
adding a fee is bad always. And it's like, no, it's making sure that adding the fee is appropriate and that value is being provided to that plan sponsor. But it reminded me of a blog on Fiduciary Wise that our friend Kate posted a couple of weeks ago, where it quoted ERISA. So this is ERISA saying this, that the duty to act prudently is one of a fiduciary's central responsibilities under ERISA, right? So they're responsible for acting prudently in the best interest of their plan participants. They go on to say it requires expertise in a variety of areas. We've talked about those, the
Mhm.
operations, administration, the legal, and the investments, right? Lacking that expertise, a fiduciary will want to hire someone with that professional knowledge to carry out that task. So ERISA is saying we require you to be an expert in these areas that we've talked about here today, Marta. Um, if you're not said expert, we think that you should hire someone who is an expert. So it's actually the exact opposite of what that plan sponsor said, that it's actually a breach of fiduciary duty to not hire an expert if they are not an expert in the investment space. And so just to is that with that as the backdrop, as we're talking about either delegating fiduciary responsibility to a service provider or hiring a service provider to execute those non-fiduciary roles, that ERISA thinks that you should be delegating and hiring if you are not yourself an expert in legal administration and investments enough to be able to provide the highest standard of care for your participants.
You nailed it. That's what it's all about. So,
Yeah.
um, I think as we start looking towards our future episodes, I hope that we can expect all of our audience to view those and dig deeper into these different areas of retirement plans, so that we can help outline, what are those best practices? How do you evaluate these service providers? And ultimately, how can Fiduciary Wise help? So we do serve as a named fiduciary, which is really the roll up to all of it. So we are happy to be of service, and we hope that you will reach out, ask questions, set up meetings with us. We do have a scheduling website, so you can pick a time that works for you, and we are happy to dig more into this with you. So thanks for tuning in to the Wise Fiduciary podcast. We would love to hear your thoughts, answer your questions. So drop us a comment, send us a message, certainly schedule a meeting with us, and don't forget to join us next time for more insights and discussions. And we will see you on the next episode.
See you next
Thanks.
time.